Hello and welcome, federal viewers. As we all know, the nation is talking about the GST reforms announced on September 3rd. Today, we will be looking at the big shakeup in India's agriculture sector. We are joined by Devinder Sharma, sir, a well known writer, researcher, columnist, to help us understand the real impact of these reforms. And how are these changes expected to cut farm costs and boost consumption? Thank you, Sharma sir, for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, my first question is the government has called the GST reforms farmer friendly. In your view, how welcoming are these changes for the agriculture sector?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear that the reforms you call it, or GST 2.0, as I see the newspapers talking about, is definitely welcome. And it has been the demand of farmers for quite some time. And they have been raising their voice that the earlier model of GST was exploitative, and so they had wanted that to be corrected. I think instead of calling it reform, we should call it a GST correction. Reform should have happened earlier, if at all they were aimed with that intention and objective. But I personally feel it is basically a correction which the government wants to project as reform.
So the rate cuts on farm machinery, fertilizers, and biopesticides are expected to reduce production costs for farmers. How big a burden has GST been for them?
Well, let's try to first understand how big has been the GST burden. And I think it is quite clear that because in agriculture, the farmers do not have the advantage of passing on their share to subsequently. So they have all been laden with additional cost over the years, and that's because not only for farm machinery, farm implements, and also for pesticides, biopesticides, and so on. I guess so. Any reduction as far as the burden on the farmer is concerned is definitely welcome. So farmers would definitely be looking forward to this reduction in cost, especially let's look at tractor. I think the way the tractor GST has been restructured now, it is quite obvious that the cost will come down by, depending upon the model, by about 45,000 to 50,000 rupees. And I think that's quite a benefit for farmers.
Sir, as you mentioned, the tractors and pumps and irrigation equipment will now attract only 5% GST. Will small and marginal farmers realistically benefit from this, or will the gains mostly reach larger farmers and agri businesses?
No, I think it will definitely benefit small farmers also. We somehow tend to believe that small farmers do not invest in the machinery and so on, which is not correct. And if you come to a state like Punjab, it is quite clear that Punjab is overladen with farm machinery. And the way we are heading towards what I call it as a junkyard for farm machines in a couple of years from now, that is what Punjab is turning out to be, or will turn out to be, I think is an indication that the infatuation with the machinery is quite serious here. And people do buy a lot of machinery. In fact, if I tell you the statistics about tractors, Punjab needs 1 lakh tractors, and it already has about 5.5 lakh tractors. So it tells you, we have more tractors than what is required in Punjab. And I only hope that the governments, when they restructure by way of GST, the ultimate cost that the farmers have to pay, must ensure that we do not overload farmers with the machinery. Because in Punjab, and in neighboring states also, these states are getting into a state where we see farm machinery lying idle for most of the times, especially for the stubble burning equipment that the government has pumped in. It has already pumped in so much of equipment at subsidized cost and so on, which is now becoming visible as if, because their relevance is getting less and less. If you look into the Happy Seeder machine that was first brought in, subsidized and brought in, is now become redundant. There are more machines, or the second generation and third generation machines that have come and replaced the happy seeder. Now, this machine was only operative for about 2-3 weeks in a year. So if the machine is lying idle, or if the iron is stocked in the farmer's field, I think it is time the governments makes another correction to see that we do not overload agriculture with additional machinery.
Machineries. Okay, right. Sir, farmers dealing in raw produce are exempt from GST now, but can't claim input tax credit, they say. Uh, can you explain us what this input tax credit is, and does this create a structural disadvantage for them?
It was, all these years we have seen ever since the GST came into effect, that if I go and buy a mobile, let's say, then it is, I'm part of a chain. So whatever reduction I get, by way of that GST exemption is somehow passed on. GST, sorry, taxes, not exemption, but the additional taxes that I pay is passed on. So I'm just one of those. Person who is in between, or like a cog in the wheel. But when it comes to agriculture, the entire cost has to be borne by the farmer. So it was an additional burden on the farmers, and I think that is where we needed either to ensure that agriculture is exempt of GST, or there had to be a mechanism evolved to see that the ball doesn't end with the farmer, or that the burden doesn't end with the farmer. He takes on the entire burden, and that is, I think, something which was paining the farming community. Let's hope, at least with the reduction in GST, that burden would be reduced, and at the same time, in many products and so on, they have now turned it into a nil GST or zero GST. That, I think, should be a added advantage to the farming community.
With tax-free milk, paneer, and cheaper butter, ghee, and cheese, which are basically farm products or dairy products, how do you see the reforms boosting rural demand and household consumption?
Well, I think when these taxes were imposed, GST was imposed, nobody told us that it is going to be reducing the demand and so on and so forth. But when you cut down on these taxes, then we all start claiming that it is going to, increase the demand for milk, butter, and paneer. Please tell me, where in this country is the demand being seen, or the demand fluctuates by way of GST or so on? I don't think so. I think this is just an economic way of justifying what you do. It's so depressing. First of all, why should a country have GST on eatables like paneer and milk and bread and butter and so on? I think that itself was a regressive step, and I'm glad they have now tried to correct it to us to some extent. But let us not fall in these jargons that the economists create, and they are very good with these terminologies and so on. They confuse us, and they confuse the ordinary consumer also. And I have always felt, whether I buy milk from the milk vendor, or I buy milk from the company which has bagged it, why should I be paying additional GST on milk or butter, or whatever, as you rightly mentioned, these commodities on which the taxes have been lowered? I think it was a reflection of the mistake the GST committees did earlier. Let us not call it a reform. Let us say that they are now making it a correction. They did a wrong, and now they are making a correction and then calling it reform. Wow, what a wonderful way. First you brought in reform by way of GST 1. Now you say, because
Thank you for putting it out, sir.
yeah, so that's what I feel. I think this kind of a correction should not be called as a reform. It is something that we have accepted, that we actually overcharged the consumers all these days, and now we are making a correction. So it is a fault of ours that we have tried to rectify.
Um, Sir, and also GST changes are finally here. And what further reforms do you think are critical for farm sectors from your
As I said
as a
earlier,
agri
the
expert?
biggest reform would be, if you still want to call it reform, that agriculture should not have GST. It should be free of GST. because we don't and we should not aim at loading the farmers with additional economic burden. I think it is time now to actually go in for a reform which was required in agriculture sector, which is please exempt it from the GST. And I'm saying, when I say exempt it, means not even 5% GST should be imposed. After all, everything that we are providing to the farmers, and if it adds on to their cost, it adds on to their low income that the farmers will eventually be able to, will be paying, or will be getting. So I think it should be very clear that we do not need GST on agriculture. Similarly, just imagine the tariffs that Trump is imposing. When you reduce the tariffs to zero, from America, the burden is being felt by the farmer here. So, but we still go on defending, like the cotton, tariffs, 11% that has been removed. It has become zero now, the cotton imports. That actually hits the farmers. So, farmer is paying, on both sides, by way of the cheaper food being imported, and then by way of, additional food costs being imposed within the country. I think these two both sides, I think we should have a uniform kind of a pattern. Please be sure that farmers need a higher income. And when I say a higher income, I think let us not forget, in 2016, the government announced that the farmers' income will be doubled in the next 5 years. But eventually, at that time also, I was asked this question, that what is the farmer's income today that it has to be double? And I said, if you look into the economic survey that was presented a couple of days before the budget of 2016, it had said very clearly that the average income of a farming family in 17 states of India, which means half the country, the average income was 20,000 rupees a year. Now, these are the people, if they are living or surviving in 20,000 rupees a year, which means less than 1,700 rupees per month, they don't need to be taxed. Give them a taxable income and then you can tax them. But, in this case, if you 20,000 rupees a month, a year would mean less than 1,700 rupees per month. Imagine, I can't even rear a cow in 1,700 rupees a month. How are the farming families surviving in half the country? And even if you take the full country, the country as such, the national assessment for rural households has shown very clearly, or what is called as structural data that the government has collected. It shows clearly that the average income of a farming family, which includes 5 members, is 10,000 rupees per month. Please tell me, at this low level, why are we thinking of imposing a GST here? So I
Yes.
think we need to bring in all kinds of, or remove all kinds of hurdles and the burdens that the farmer has to, additionally pay for, and ensure that agriculture incomes go up. And that is what income parity is, the need of the times. When I say income parity, the income between the, let's say, class 3 employee of the government and the
Mhm.
income of a farmer should be similar. That should be on a parity norm. Why should farmers be at the bottom of the pyramid, is a question that we must keep in mind whenever we are having tax reforms or tax structures being redesigned.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights, sir. It was very interesting talking to you. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.